Hey, and welcome back to the latest edition of our conversations with writers. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Gareth Stack. Hey, Gareth, how you doing?
Oh,
So Gareth Stack is an Irish writer and filmmaker, and his radio dramas have been serialized on News Talk and Lyric FM. He has written for magazines including The Runt, No More Workhorse, Albedo One, and Analog Music Magazine. So Gareth, yeah, thanks very much for joining us. How are you feeling this evening? Are you good form? Or
yes, summer in Dublin. Everything is good.
yeah, it's kind of it's quite a sunny day here. It's mid-June, so it's abnormally warm for Ireland here. In addition to the pieces you published in magazines, you also co-wrote a novel, hip novel, with Andrew Booth. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like? Give a quick introduction of the novel and maybe tell us a little bit about what it's like co-writing a novel, because I don't come across that many novels that are written collaboratively like that.
Yeah, it's so strange to talk about it because you approached me to talk about it, and I thought, well, this is a book that hasn't been published, which is a strange one, and in fact, not really very submitted either, and it'll become clear why. But what happened effectively is, I was always wrote in my teens, as many people did, and younger even, before I reached my teens, wrote lots of stories and so on, and then you become, as you get into your older teens, you become very self-conscious and neurotic, and you start to really care about what your writing is and what it says about you and how people perceive it. And so I stopped writing for a few years, and then I went to college. I was a mature student, and I met Andrew Booth, who was in doing a different course at the same time. We met in the radio station in college, and he had a very different way of thinking about writing. So one of Andrew's hobbies was he would write reviews for things on Amazon, but the reviews would have nothing to do with the thing that he was reviewing. So he might review,
Okay.
yeah, you might review like a toilet duck or something, but the review would be an impassioned essay about how Morrissey's fascism had disappointed his fans, or some sort of love letter to a fictional person who had written an earlier review or something like this. And there was an absurdism and a joy to that I found really inspiring. So Andrew and I started doing these reviews together, and then we just kind of started. We had a blog. Which was nothing but these reviews, and it would be, the new review of the new Radiohead album, and then it would be just some sort of strange short story which had nothing to do with the Radiohead album. And we got just huge crack out of this silly, really absurd conceit. And so somehow we set on the idea of writing something more substantial, and we decided to co-write this novel, which initially was called Jackdaw Fool. Um, and which became, I bought the domain hip novel because I just thought it was ridiculous, and I thought, well, we have to change the name of the novel now. We just have to call it hip novel. And so the book sort of lent itself naturally to collaboration because it's a series of literary parodies, I guess. So there is a coherent story, but each chapter is written in the style of a different writer. And so we could go away and write a chapter or two chapters and disappear for the summer and come back and have another bit written and send things back and forth. So in a way, it was very easy because Andrews has such an open mind and is so relaxed. And he went on to edit the college comedy magazine and run his own magazine and for a while. And so he just had a very, he would be much more collaborative than me. I'm the person who's like, okay, I need to change everything you've just written. So maybe that's necessary, for such a collaboration. One person has to be the person who's like, none of this makes sense, that you've gone too far or whatever. And the other person has to be just very generous of spirit. So that was all Andrew. But
Okay.
yeah, it was a very pleasurable experience, and I look back. I think it took us probably, we got the guts of it written in a couple of months, and then took like another year or two to really finish it and sit down and actually go through it and go through it and go through it. And then when we finished it, we realized like this, we've written something that's completely unpublishable. So
What can you just give a quick synopsis, sorry, of the book itself, the of hip novel, or what it's
I
what
actually
the
I
basic
have one behind, Andrew. I thought you'd ask. So I have a one paragraph synopsis. So let me drag that onto this monitor. Okay, so it says hip novel is a bitingly funny. Okay, well, apologies for that. It was probably still in my 20s writing this synopsis. Hip novel is a bitingly funny homage to the cult novel, skewering the sacred cows of edgy literary fiction from Palahniuk to Amos, from Murakami to J.T. Leroy. The book follows the adventures of narcissistic, homicidal American television critic Iago Coates. Coates is Rabbit Angstrom as imagined by Patrick Bateman, a creature whose boundless appetites are rivaled only by the insignificance of his talent. The novel's style runs the gamut from muscular minimalist to ice-cool consumer fetishism to beat loquaciousness and pomo-surrealism, dotted with thousands of literary and television references and dozens of literary styles. The structure of the book reflects the disillusion of the literary landscape. The book becomes ever more chaotic and breathless, reflecting the decomposition of Coke's mind as he reinvents literary theory, pillages womankind, defiles the International Space Station, and rampages across the continental United States, holding a mirror up to an increasingly unsane society. So, very college literary fiction.
And so, yeah, so with the was there something else you want to say about the collaborative process, or
No,
um,
I suppose
sort of
just
more?
that I went
Yeah.
on and did another one, I suppose, after. There was people might probably people is anyone watching your videos under anyone watching may have heard of
Literally
NaNoWriMo, National
tens of people are watching. So
yeah, so this is thing National Novel Writing Month. So it's a really, really fun. I recommend anyone do it where you write a novel in a month. So another friend of mine, John Hoisted, and I, who were living together after college, did that, and we wrote another kind of set of. Actually, it ended up being two novels that are kind of paired. So I guess it sounds like it shouldn't work, but it kind of can as long as you figure out a way that both people can have a ridiculous level of freedom in the process, and I suppose it's easier when it doesn't have to be. There's no onus for it to be commercial in any sense at all. So.
and just speaking about that, yeah, did you kind of briefly sent Ship Novel out a bit, did you? Or
When I think about it now, I mean, not really. I think I sent it to. You'd know better than me, but there was a briefly popular in the late 2000s, early 2010s. There was some kind of genre of extreme, strange horror meets surrealism novel that had some briefly flurry of popularity. While our book wasn't really anything like that, I figured those publishers will publish any old mad shite. So I sent along to a few of them, and there was one of them was like, I really love it, but I can't ever publish this. I would have to leave the country. And there was a lecturer in a literary department in New Zealand, because I forgot to mention, we posted for a while, we were going to keep posting it online. So we posted the first few chapters online, and some lecturer in an English department in, I think, Queensland, maybe, spotted it and loved it and ended up teaching it to his class in some strange way. So he got a full copy of the manuscript, but that's really as far as it went. And I think the landscape had changed. We even more so now, we have sensitivity readers and old novels being re-edited for contemporary tastes. But even back then, even 2013, when we were kind of looking to publish it really wasn't, the Chuck Palahniuks of this world, the Martin Ameses couldn't have published their work, let alone our far more insane, sad influenced screed. So maybe, I sort of live in a kind of a vain, sad hope that the day will come again when we swing towards a more 4chan society and we can put it out there. But it's unlikely at this point, I suppose.
we're not going to venture down that vortex again.
Green Texas had its day.
And here, okay. Well, and I mean, was that kind of difficult in a sense? Did you feel that you were kind of giving up on the novel, or did you feel maybe just you had to park it for a while? Or
Yeah, no, it was very difficult, and I sort of have a very ambivalent relationship with the literary world. I have published some stories, but I've written a lot more that I haven't submitted, or I've submitted them, but they haven't been kind of what the market was looking for, and it did break my heart. I think as a writer, anyone people can say you write for love, of course, but you write to be read. And so for years, I was doing stand up at the time, kind of in that period, and I would perform pieces at various nights. And so it did get to some parts of it got to be heard, and there was even a mini riot once at, I think Graw was the night that Raven used to run in the Cobblestone, and there was someone was, after I read and left, someone stood up and was so disgusted that they started roaring at the organizers, and there was some kind of scuffle. So it did cause a mini riot. So it was, there was
Oh, I think I was at that. I missed the riot at the end, but I recall I really think I was at that evening. Yeah, it was
you left
it's a
before the riot.
divisive excerpt. What's that?
You left before it became violent.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's if you're kind of working in that transgressive space, I guess it's sort of an occupational hazard that it'll provoke a strong response. Like, so
I do wish that we'd written it 10 years before. Had that been possible, I feel like if instead of been writing it sort of 2011, 12, 13, we'd been writing it in the early 2000s or even the mid 2000s, it would have been the kind of thing that could possibly have found an audience. Because
mm,
it wasn't written just to shock. We were really trying to write the best book we could, but also pushing, because the books that we loved were so crazy, and at the
mm,
time we were reading, Amos and Desaad and all these people who were transgressive, but in an interesting and clever way. Well, maybe Desaad is just transgressive, but fun. It's not like Fortran. It's not written to sort of be the most disturbing thing ever. It's more written to be sort of provoke you and be shocking, and that aesthetic has kind of gone, and I
mm.
miss it. I don't miss things that are just shocking, but I miss things that are good and shocking, which is
Yeah, yeah. I suppose there are kind of indie publishers who are trying to push things out in that space, but yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly, yeah, with the mainstream publishers, like you said, they're probably becoming quite conservative the last kind of decade or so. Yeah, in terms of what they're putting out. But yeah.
and I think that
Um,
they've lost a lot of audience, from that. I mean, literary fiction's audience has grown because reading in general has grown, but I think, famously, men don't read now. And I remember having a discussion with another writer at one point, and she was like, "Why do you think that is?" And I said, "Well, quite frankly, there aren't books for them." And she didn't like that as an answer, but I think there is a truth in that. It's, if things are unsayable, then people who need to hear them won't be interested in hearing what you have to say, because it doesn't connect. So there is something, I think, maybe in the young male audience that wants the visceral, exciting, transgressive thing, and if that's not produced, then maybe there's nothing there for them. So that's what bring us back, and we will save the young men. That's really what I was trying to say. Single.
yeah, yeah. There's probably. I mean, do you think this transgressive fiction is kind of a young male sort of thing,
Yeah, I
um
think it's like
or
crime. It's not that it's exclusively young and male, but it helps.
okay. And you wrote you had a play as well, Mic Drop, which was I was at there was a performance of it at the Smock Alley Theatre a couple of years back. What's the process of like writing a play and I suppose getting it performed? You directed as well, right? So how does that
Yeah,
differ from the novel process of writing a novel?
yeah. So I suppose after the novel and our various magazine ventures, I did get into writing professionally, but what I in the domain of radio drama, a less competitive field with lower stakes could not exist. So at the time there was quite a bit of funding you could get to make radio dramas. So I did that
Okay.
for years. And that sort of taught me how to write scripts, because I would say writing any kind of script is very different from writing a novel. Completely different mental space, different skills, different structure. But writing a radio drama versus writing a stage play versus writing a film are all quite similar. And so moving to theater wasn't so different. So I did a couple of plays. I had one at a festival called the New Irish Playbook, and that was called One Night Forever Ago. And then I had one at Smock Alley at the Collaborations Festival. I think it might have been called Seen and Heard. They've changed the name a couple of times of that festival, but the play was called Mic Drop, and it's a one-man show. I didn't star in it. I directed it and wrote it, and I had a brilliant actor perform the role, and yeah, it was very challenging, because the show, it ended up being quite long. I think it was about 35-40 minutes,
Sure.
and we ended up getting main stage because Caoimhe Connolly, who ran the festival at the time, really liked the show. So it was a lot of pressure, really
Yeah.
kind of first play in a major theater, directing and writing, and it was a lot for the actor, because he had to remember 40 minutes. So that it is totally different. I don't know. It's like obviously theaters and radio plays are all dialogue, and you have to sort of
Yeah.
build and focus the attention. And part of the reason that I did it was because I think kind of one person shows are usually really, really bad. It's an amazing form if done well, but to hold people's attention for that duration, you're not telling one story. You're building a bunch of little rises and falls of tension, and you're trying to carry an audience through that, but also have a meta narrative, and also have, you need to have moments that are still, and moments that are sad, and moments that are frightening, and it has to sort of make sense, and the character has to change. And I just thought I hadn't seen it done well on stage. But I was working with this really great young actor called Adam Tyrrell, and I knew he could bring this intensity. So the play is about sort of a Niall Harbison style character. I was gonna say I could beep that out, but I know you won't. It's not Niall Harbison, but it is of that universe, sort of a
Sort of
.com.
guru. He's based on, he could be based on various kind of people. Like he's doing sort of a motivational speech basically towards the audience. So there's very little fourth wall as well. He's basically speaking to the actual audience of the play as if they were attending a seminar, essentially. Yeah.
And that was part of the fun of it as well, was to start that way and then have it become more theatrical as he sort of loses his mind over the course of the show. And I think it worked well enough. We could have done with a bit more rehearsing, maybe. And I often talk to Adam about it, that sort of, we did go on and do it as a radio drama. So actually, if anyone's interested, Mic Drop is the name of the play. It is up on my website as a radio drama, which is obviously pretty close to what we've done. But the character has, there are so many people now on TikTok doing startup douchebag guy. But at the time, I hadn't seen any of it really. Maybe a couple of sketches, and I think we did something interesting with it. It was a fun project.
Yeah, it was. It is an interesting, in the sense that that play was. I think that there was a drive I mean, the actor, besides memorizing all the lines, to actually have that interaction with the audience, or to try and provoke the audience somewhat, to kind of pose questions directly to them and so forth. So I suppose that's a dynamic you can't completely control until it's curtain up.
Yeah, exactly. And there's moments where he asks the audience questions and then interrupts them. And we played with doing a little bit more interactivity. And I feel like if we'd gone and done Edinburgh or something like that, we would have maybe played on that. But it was really challenging because actors are trained their whole career to not spike the lens, to not treat the audience as a participant. And playing with that dynamic I think that was the hardest thing for Adam, was to be able to walk that line where in moments he is and then in moments he isn't. And to not let the pace, because when there's just reams of dialogue, you can really just run it, just get really fast and just try to go through it, or to get caught in one moment and get really into it and then not be able to emotionally transition. It was a super ambitious piece, but I think it went down pretty well. I don't know, you saw it, people seem to like it, so nothing happened from it, but it was like I say, I'm glad I did it. Yeah.
No, it got good reviews, and it is clearly, it's I'll post a link to a website just in the description. But the radio play is worth checking out. Like, it has but I mean, it's a bit like hip novel in the sense you can see that whoever wrote this isn't kind of coasting, like they're going for it, like they want to write something that's has some kind of impact. Or
Yeah, and like I was kind of jokingly kind of deriding contemporary novels, but I do feel like there is a sort of juicelessness in a lot of contemporary writing. Not everything. I mean, there's fantastic, Darren McCluskey, who I think we both know, and the other writers like in that generation. There are some fantastic ones, but I think a lot of literary fiction went in a very navel gazing, reflective, genteel direction, and theater too. And obviously quite issue based and stuff like that, which is fine, but you also have to bring the money, and for me, if you're not making the reader feel something, I was reading a review of Tao Lin's novel Taipei, which is the sort of the novel of the hipster era. I think I tried reading it at the time, and I couldn't get through it. And the review was just going on about how awful it was, because it sort of seemed to hate language. And I think there is something that we're in a dip of sort of maybe anti language, and Irish writing has always been very rich in language and very rich in playfulness and literary intertextuality and discourse. And we're in a very heady sort of self-aware time for writing. And there was a short story written recently, heavily inspired by me, in the Dublin Review, from a sort of an embittered ex. And I thought, well, you could have at least given it some juice, just, my character was, underwritten, a bit of a sounding board. Yeah, I haven't even let you get a word in, Andrew, in this whole interview. Can you imagine? Like, it's not believable. But yeah, you got to bring the juice. Got to bring the juice.
So you felt that your inner juiciness as a person wasn't represented on the page.
A container cannot be smaller than the liquid that it holds.
When you say anti-language, sorry, I think you lost me a tiny bit there. What do you mean by anti-language?
Well, so I mean, there's a long tradition in American literary writing, going back to Hemingway and before, and obviously through McCarthy, RIP, of sort of very careful, very adjective, adverb allergic, parsimonious language that's very often very allegorical, muscular, and I think that transitioned into, this is getting super fucking navel gazing here, but I think with the emergence of the MFA, in the 90s and early 2000s, you had a professional class of people going away to study not literature, but how to write. And a lot of
This
that
is a master. This is a master of fine arts in
yeah,
creative writing. Yeah, yeah.
which is sort of now one of the things that is, if not expected, very, very helpful to become a published writer, and certainly to be taken
Published
seriously.
literary writer, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, but even I think a lot of writers in commercial fiction would have MFAs as well, and it has produced, I think, quite an anemic, not irony, I know, quite just quite a self-conscious and icy and reflective, careful, loopy kind of writing that just goes back in and of itself, and is very much trying to tear apart without ever feeling. And I just find it so uninteresting. I want a writer, or at least a character, to have a voice, and I don't care if I like them or not. That's not, to me, that's not the point. The point is that I feel something, that I care about their journey, that writing should, even literary fiction, especially literary fiction, like Joyce, should have all of the juiciness of commercial fiction, of that was all that stuff that was invented, by the Brontes, and in the Edwardian period. The dragging the author through the penny dreadful should always be there. We should, the audience, we should always entertain as well.
Yeah.
And there's so much writing now that is just not entertaining and not interesting, and it sort of tells you it pushes up its glasses, and it Hannah Gadsby's its face into a little expression, and it says, I'm very important, and that's death art. It really is. So
I think,
I'm
yeah, when you say that, yeah, I do. I know there is a certain style of MFA, heavily MFA style writing, and yeah, the word icy probably kind of describes it. Or it's very analytical without having. Being analytical is fine, but it just feels like the emotion. If there are emotions, they're sort of like simulacra of emotions or something. Yeah.
exactly. And as all writers, I think, there's a certain kind of schizoid personality that's drawn into writing, like the person who feels more watching a movie maybe than they do having an experience. And the last thing that person should do is sit in a room for 3 or 4 years or 6 years, and think about that. What they should probably do is read lots of books and have some life happen to them. And that's a really, writing loads and reading loads are how you become a writer. He said it in the most inarticulate way possible, but you don't become a writer by breaking your text down and questioning your assumptions, and you definitely don't by reading a lot of critical theory. You certainly don't become a good one. So that's sort of a great sin that has been wrought on the world. But in my humble opinion.
Yeah, like I was thinking, yeah, my like the book, the last novel I finished, Stigma Play, is very meta fictional, but I do try within the scenes that take place within a simulation that I try to make kind of, that will probably be kind of emotionally um taxing, for want of a better word. But yeah, it is great when something there is, like you say, like a lot of agents, speaking of the publishing world, like a lot of agents will say they're always looking for a voice, like a character people can connect with, and they have a sort of a raw emotional connection with. So yeah, but
You picture you read things like, I want this something edgy and interesting, but that what they really want is something that's very like something else that's been successful with a slightly different spin on it from the right kind of person. And that's,
okay.
that there's a little sour grapes, but there's also a lot of wine in that statement, I think.
A bit of sour grapes with a lot of wine. Okay. Cool, cool. Um, would you like to read an excerpt of Hip Novel? Let's get out of our heads so and stop
Yes.
being let's stop being kind of like wannabe MFA course
Yeah, yeah.
podcasters here.
Well, so we talked about this before we started recording, and I thought, what could I read from it? And you said, "Oh, read the introduction." I think it's because it's probably the least offensive bit, or at least the least offensive one that comes easily to hand. So it's not. This is kind of ironic because I'm talking about navel gazing and MFAs, and I suppose the introduction is a sort of a parody of that. Just as the synopsis I read was obviously very intentionally self-aggrandizing. Um, there's just a lot of. It was a very ironic period of time that we wrote the book. Um, so it
I think
has
it does. I think it does capture like a certain kind of style of writing. Maybe it doesn't really capture the plot of the book, obviously, because it's like a preface. But
yeah.
it does capture some of the kind of the voice I've sometimes heard coming through in your work. So
Yeah, hopefully. Well, okay. So the book starts off with a manifesto by way of an introduction, which is a direct reference to the band Cold War Kids, who had a manifesto, I think, in their first or second album, which we just got a huge kick out of the fact that they were that pretentious. So I'll read it, but like I say, it's not really it's not narrative, but whatever. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Writer face on. Hip Novel is a book for our time, a loosely structured homage to cult fiction from Amos's. This is very similar to the synopsis, I'm realizing. Anyway, from Amos's Money to Nabokov's Lolita, the book follows the misadventures of Iago Coates, an American television critic, as he reinvents literary theory, pillages womankind, defiles the International Space Station, and rampages across the continental United States, holding a mirror up to an increasingly unsane society. Coates is a cartoon, a gluttonous, ain-crazed man-child, a messianic super freak, sumptuously sketched and oversaturated. He illustrates our all-too-vivid hyperreality. His excesses are our excesses. His confused infantile desperation, his attacks on love and beauty and on prostitutes are our own. Fumbling in the post-positivist dark, drawn to the flickering images on our haunted machines, anymore we fuck and fight and feed, not from true visceral drives, but heightened, accelerated filmic pseudo-motions. We melt under the naked flame of paranoia, apart even together, huddled in texting clods for warmth, skimming citations of synopsis on aggregated feeds, fleeing the agonizing realities of genocide, fanaticism, and environmental self-destruction in transnational corporate-sponsored pseudo-culture. This book abounds with references, the lingua franca of the fictive fever dream we each and separately inhabit, meeting over antimony septic water coolers to exchange ever more fragmented glimpses of nothing. To write a novel that ignores the contemporary dysphoria is to engage in the creation of a nostalgic anachronism. Hip Novel, like its protagonist, celebrates the hell of 21st century existence, throws a street party at the stroke of midnight, stares a CCTV camera in the lens, and smiling spits. When they dragged Sid Vicious, blood-stained and overdosing from the Chelsea Hotel, we were complicit. We'd written the script of the soap opera that ended Nancy Spungen's life. When Sadie Mae brought Helter Skelter to the Tate Mansion, we all got away with murder. Who killed the hippie burning at the Panhandle? You killed the hippie. You and me and our GPS 200-channel oil-guzzling SUV makes 3. We bleat into the matrices, endlessly serving the culture reconstituted versions of itself, an infinitely varied dust buffet of food-like edible substances. We beg the machine, notice us, hear us, watch us as we dance naked for your billion phatic eyes. Let us disappear. We huddle in our fortress Europes and gated Americas, quivering as the fly-eyed hordes shake the walls, crying, "Oh dear," as we toss crumbs from the barricades and play corporate rock, paper, scissors. We are proto-cokes, every one of us, hungry and growing ever more perverse, ominously shivering Krakatoa of adrenochrome, venom and bile. We are the rulers of the world, drunk and bloated from a 1,000-year feast, smug and certain of our course as we power down the highway, our children terrified and broken in the back, our ex-wife, a fresh bruise cresting her once beautiful cheek, riding silent shotgun. She knows what's coming. This is our story. The authors, March 2009. That's a gentle introduction, Steve.
So fun for all the family, needless to say.
Absolutely. The Manson family.
Jeez. So, are there any irons in the fire you have at the moment, or any kind of future projects you'd like to
Yeah,
discuss?
I've been writing a series of short stories. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. If by mad chance any literary agent is watching this has gotten this far, do reach out. Yeah, no, wait. So I was in Berlin for a couple of years. So I've written a series of stories that are about what it feels like to be in Berlin right now and kind of contemporary love and dating. Because I have an interest going back to when we wrote for the porn magazine after college, Blue Ireland, in sex and sexuality. And my partner and I have a podcast called Everybody Wants to Love You, where we discuss sex and dating. And so I guess the stories are a more serious or a more nuanced attempt to really explore some of the feelings of alienation and of lust and of emptiness and of joy that Berlin and I guess now our GPT age has wrought.
Rotted our brains. And so if we can finish on a bombshell, are the people of Berlin alienated by their own lust? Yes or no, please.
I think they're alienated by their desire to be alienated by their own lust. I think there's a lot of people who are cosplaying Berlin of 15 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago or even 100 years ago in the Berlin of today. It is a very meta-real hyperfiction of a place that does feel quite like you just missed the party. The entire city is a constant state of FOMO. So still fun, but there's very much a sense that didn't you have a hotter sister who just left? That's what Berlin is today.
So if there are any listeners in Berlin amongst my tens of fans, apologies if that was too close to the bone. But look, thanks very much for doing, Gareth. Any
Thanks very
final
much.
thoughts or
Revolution is still possible. Let's Butlerian Jihad bring down the machine before it's too late.
and the final point is you were the initiator of the religion of post-reasonablism, which you can also find out more about on Gareth's website.
That's a deep cut, Andrew. But you are, I think, also an originator of the philosophy of post-reasonablism in your own sense.
Yeah, I think it was based very much on your analysis of my personality. So yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
deep cut.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for listening this week. I'll put more details in the description for it to check out more Gareth Stack based material. Thanks very much for joining.
Thank you.